Okay, so we are back into another Dragon Ball Super card game video, and this one is a little bit different, but also should be pretty quick to kind of talk about. The main thing that I really wanted to kind of ask is, why hasn't Pan ever won an event? And the thing is that you can kind of replace Pan for really any leader or deck or archetype for with that sentence, basically, right? And it's one of those things you kind of have to understand that there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And I think it boils down to 3 different things. But before we even take a look at that, the reason why I wanted to bring up Pan specifically is because if you look at the last 3 events, she's always had some sort of like some sort of top or some sort of showing, some sort of representation. And here in the last one, where only set 5 was only allowed in Vegas, there was 3 Pan. And the second celebrations where set 6 was allowed, there was what? No Pan? 1 Pan. There it is. And then in Chicago's, there was 2 Pan? 2 Pan, including Devon's. And then if you look at San Diego, we didn't have any Pan. And there's a one main reason for that, and it kind of goes into the third reason that I'm going to go into last. And before we go into that, let me take a look at Devon's deck, okay? So that way you can kind of understand why Pan is good, but also probably will never top an event if the things remain the same within this card game. And this can kind of apply to any card game. I don't want anybody to put in the comments of like, well, duh, Android, this is why, this is the reason why. But of course I understand, and this is what I'm going to go through. But this is the whole premise of any card game, right? The 3 things I'm going to talk about kind of apply to anything from Yu-Gi-Oh to Pokemon to anything that's competitive, even like Hearthstone or something, or Magic, right? So if we look at Pan itself, it is very much of a tempo deck. I think those who play Pan and played against it can kind of understand that. We have a lot of tools that now in red can mitigate a lot of different decks, from the Is That All You Got, from the new Destruction Rare, from having minus Zone in order to not stop the plays that it wants to, like the Fearless Pan or Chain Attack into Zeno, or into Fearless Pan, or into Foreseeing Hit, right? It's all about that tempo. It's all about making sure to put some aggression on early in, and then swinging the tempo as much as you can, and having card advantage as much as you can as well, right? And that's all about Pan, all about it, from the Zeno, from putting aggression on in their turn, from having Bodyguard Legic as that simple blocker, but getting the draw from it, and as well as a 20k attacker / blocker. You know, it's those type of things. And I think Devon's, I hate to say it, is a good example of a good Pan deck, and something I would like to kind of put reference to. And if you are watching this, Devon, wait until the end, okay? At least before you say anything. But that is the whole premise of Pan, making sure to have tempo, making sure to do that. However, that kind of puts me into the first sort of point for Pan or any other fair, quote-unquote fair deck, right? The first one is advantage. Can you make or have enough advantage versus other decks? And if we take a look at the top 16, or at least the top decks, pretty much the 16 top 16 decks, that really kind of that thought really exemplifies when looking at these other decks. So for instance, Super Shenron, and this can be put through any sort of type of advantage. So do you have that card advantage over your opponent? Can you maintain a higher card count in your hand versus your opponent at all times, right? Can you have a board presence better than your opponent in order to swing more and more? Can you continue and have that multiple actions per turn advantage versus your opponent, right? Those are all the things that you kind of have to understand when talking about advantage. Super Shenron does that, Hirudegarn does that, Vanilla Goku does that really well. Janemba doesn't really do that, but it goes against those who are trying to get that hand advantage and trying to control the game due to pure advantage as well. Board advantage, not so much, but hey, whatever. But it still has the tools for it. And then we have also the Brawler starter deck, the starter deck Broly, which is a little bit different. When you kind of consider the actions per turn for starter deck Broly, turn 1 and 2, they can do a lot. They can do a lot of attacks. They can get a big boy on the board, and they can control your advantage in your hand and as well as on the board, because you have to defend against it, and because it's going to get popped due to the Broly effects. And due to the Broly effects yet again, and as well as the leader, they can just draw more and more, and as well as continue the chain whenever they want, as long as they have the pieces. So those things are really sort of the things that you have to kind of understand when talking about advantage. And even with the not the blue Dende, but the yellow Dende, it takes away advantage through the 4-drop Planetary Frieza, and as well as putting on board a 20k double striker, either for free or for 2 energy, which is quite a lot. Again, are you using your energy most efficiently and making sure to control the board, your hand, their hand, having advantage over them, etc., right? That's kind of the biggest thing when it comes down to these top decks. If you aren't able to do that in any deck, it doesn't matter if it's the decks that I went over in the Latin America Championship. It doesn't matter what they are. It can be Mass Sand, it could be Legacy Bear Goku, it can be Shenron, it could be etc., right? Beforehand, Shenron dominated because it had that kind of advantage and it had that big boy win con. But now we're doing a lot of things earlier into the game with Broly, with the Hurrican, or the Agents of Destruction. I was going to say Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Super Shenron, all those things. You're doing a lot of things earlier, so that way the people who are trying to do things later, like the Shenron Gogeta, are at a disadvantage. So those are the things that you, again, if you're trying to make a rogue deck, if you're trying to make something that is off basis, if you're doing something or trying to make a deck meta, that is the first thing you have to understand to kind of compete with first. Because you can top a Zamasu, sure, but if you don't have that advantage over another deck or other decks on a consistent basis, you're not going to go anywhere. And that kind of brings me to the second point, which is the deck too fair? So going back to Pan, I think Pan is probably one of the best designed leaders that we have in the game. There's not very many. Like, I think Vanilla Goku is really well designed. I think Pan is really well designed. I think Universe 7 Vegeta is really well designed. These are really well designed leaders. But at the same time, is it too fair? I think Pan has enough tools in order to combat the meta, the good decks, etc. But I think it is too much on that fair basis. There is nothing that makes Pan broken. There's nothing that makes her really, really good over a number of decks. It just covers a lot of bases, and it does what it wants to do pretty damn well. And it has enough answers against other things. And when it comes to fair, we have to consider other things. So let's take a look at Marcus's first place Shenron deck. I think this is oppressive enough, or at least unfair enough, for it to dominate the meta because of the way it is. So the thing for this is that the Bardock into the Dependent Dynasty and into Intrepid, into Path of Greatness, into High to Mastery, it has a lot of answers early game and mid game in order to go ham, basically. Because now with the Explorer Boma untapping and the Personal Ambition drawing, and as well as getting all those cards into the drop, you now have that advantage, and you now have a deck that could be unfair because you are untapping and doing so many actions per turn, and as well as taking another turn right after. So those are the things you kind of have to consider when talking about fair. Like, is it are we having enough? Do they have enough? Do they do enough things for something to not be fun anymore to go against, or not to be fair to go against? And do they have enough answers? And the thing about this deck is that I think it has answers, but also has answers to those answers, right? So Dark Power Man is saying, okay, you can just play Tau, because now if they're ditching 2 to play out a Bulma, they can easily ditch out 2 Child's Wish targets or 2 dead cards, and then if you play Tau right after that, you have to warp 3 of them because of that. So now you're being punished for something that you're supposed to be punishing them. For Veku, as far as the 10k barrier card that is a Borgos that pops energy, you have Harmonic Energy, so now you have to you can play Child's Wish and now you can pop it easily. Now for untapping like Explorer Bulma or Preface or Senzu Bean, we have Gali Destruction Whis, but now we also have Crisis Crusher in the main. And even taking a look at David's deck, this is sort of the same thing, right? We have the Crisis Crusher to answer against the Spargos and things of that sort of area, and we have the blue sort of small engine to keep it going between or on their turn. We have the side for the Path of Greatness to side those things out for those longer games. We have the TN to go against that Janemba, who is going to be milling you out or tempting to do that because you are drawing so much and getting so much into the drop. So that way you can be aggressive and as well as punish them for playing that leader for that, or because of that, basically. And the other thing is that you get to take another turn and then put 20 cards in your deck. So Janemba is really kind of a non-factor for that. When he was first released, Super Shenron, that is kind of one of the things that I was like, oh, now we have a Janemba to answer. But now I don't know about that. I think he is this deck is kind of like a almost everything answer. Now, if we take a look at other decks, is it too fair, right? I don't think Asian Destruction Dende is, I won't say it's unfair, right? But it also does something that is almost borderline not very fair, which is play out numerous 20k bodies with critical slash just 20k slash an ultimate for 2 energy, technically, that has triple strike and that can also restand. And because of minus Killy Zone, it answers the answers for that in Crisis or Crusher Ball and as well as Cold Bloodlust. So because of that, it can do whatever it wants in turn. So now you're forced to defend against it. Now you're forced to play around it. I don't really have a problem with this. This is just one of those things you have to kind of consider when talking about quote unquote fair decks. Is comparing to Pan, comparing this to Goku Black, comparing this to Mass Saiyan, it doesn't do any of that on this kind of level, right? And if you're talking about levels and power levels and things of like tier lists, right? These Pan and all these other ones get bumped down because of these type of decks, because of the things that they can do, and because of the number of things they can do in turn. And I can kind of go on and on, right? For the Broly starter, people ready 2 events in a row. It's enough to show that it is a very powerful deck, and it is not so much too fair, right? The key word here, is it too fair or fair, right? Is it above that fairness level? Is it good enough? Is it a solid deck enough for it to be a contender? Same thing for the previous celebrations. How to Master Your Broly, still one of those things that came out and still did really well, but now because of the Super Shenron and other decks, these decks that went to turn 4, turn 5 are being pushed out for the decks that you have to defend turn 2 or turn 3. And same thing for Baby, same thing for any other red leader, because of those main targets being at 3 to 4 energy. And you can't really tap out at 3, and if you tap out 4, that's just not worth it unless you're going to be wiping the board and have a plan later in order to untap the energy. And finally, that kind of brings me down to the last point of why Pan won't top, or why X, Y, and Z won't top an event, or win an event, that is, specifically win an event. And that's that good players play good decks. And I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but really consider this. Take a look at all the players that top. Most of the time, you will see the same amount of names on the East and West Coast, sometimes even Midwest, whatever it may be, right? Like people from PPG, people from Kitchen Table Meta, people from Scatter Report, people from Shenron's Lair. They're all going to play the best deck possible. And if they're playing the best deck possible, that in turn already pushes any other deck that may or may not be as good or too fair. So you won't catch. Okay, let me put this another way. You won't. I was gonna name drop some of these people, but you won't see too many people who consistently top play fair decks or less than good decks or less than oppressive decks. The reason why they play those decks is because they want to win. I think that's very obvious, right? But the other part of it is that, okay, so what if these other players took these other decks and tried to play the same way they played the oppressive or really good decks? What if David Fujimura played Mass Saiyan? Would he be successful or as successful as he did? Probably not, but it could mitigate other decks that we didn't even know had a bad matchup for it. What if Green Broly had a bad matchup for Mass Saiyan, right? What if Skillless had a bad matchup with Universe 7 Frieza? What if Super Shenron had a bad matchup for Mono Blue Huracan? And some of those things, the things I just mentioned, they very well could be bad matchups, like the aggro for Mass Saiyan versus Green Broly, the delay in ramp and Victory Strike versus Vanilla Goku, you know, the Phantom Flame Cannon and other options versus Super Shenron, and defense that it brings. It really kind of mitigates the things into drop, or the things on field into drop, and then you put more cards into your deck, preventing the 20 card extra turn. Okay, whatever. I don't know, but think about that. Think about if these better players took less than better decks and made them their own, and then tried to top with them in these other events. Which is why I like the Nationals, in which if someone has their invite, you do see other people play less than good decks in order to have fun, because they do have their invite, and topping is not that big of a deal to them. And I would hate to put them on blast, but I think Peter Katani did play the Bojack deck, which, you know, we all know Bojack is just kind of just doing Bojack things. The only good thing about him is the SR. So he didn't. I don't know if he topped. I'm pretty sure if he did take that, I don't know if he topped. So those are the things that I'm trying to say. Like, you know, what if more players did that? I really do respect that he did do that. But that's the thing. That's kind of the biggest reason why you won't see Pan make it to the first place position, because of that, and of course the other two reasons. So do they have a huge advantage or a consistent advantage over other decks? Is it too fair? Is it fair enough for anybody to play it and have a good 50-50 matchup? Or is it just above fair, in which it's good enough to top on a consistent basis, like these decks that we're looking at right now? Or and then the third one is that, are the good players playing those type of decks? And I don't think so. It's very possible that some teams, you know, took a chance of playing other decks, but that's the other thing. You're taking a chance in playing other decks instead of playing the quote-unquote meta decks. And that's just sort of the way it goes when it comes down to some of these decks, and as well as some of these ideas and archetypes. We won't know if well, we already know that Namekian's isn't that great, but we won't know if Golden Frieza red green or green yellow is good against X, Y, and Z deck or top meta deck until someone plays it. And I'm not saying that a good player needs to play it, but I think more people need to play it. And I think also more people need to open their mind up when taking a look at the card pool, instead of taking a look at the contender decks. I only played Vanilla Goku because I really played it. Let's just don't point fingers at me. I really like it, that is. Don't be pointing fingers at me. But I'm still saying, like, hopefully in the upcoming meta, going into set 7, going into these multicolored cards, going into even more expansions in the future, and as well as these new Shenron cards from the power boosters, we're going to see more decks, and we're going to see more things coming out. We do have PPG's Dallas, I do believe, event coming up on April 20th, right? That weekend? Someone correct me. And, you know, hopefully we're going to see a little bit more as far as variety of the decks. Yes, I think this meta is great. I think we have a very diverse meta from the decks that we have. But breaking this down and really trying to think about Pan and the other decks that kind of are on the same level really makes me think of, like, okay, what could happen if we didn't have these other decks that were in the meta? Would we see more variants? Would we see a Pan win a whole event? Who knows? Other than that, that is the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, dislike, subscribe if you're new, join the Discord, of course, and I'll see you in the next one.